Hi folks, John Cordisco back again. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Boy, am I excited. Nakamura finally broke his streak against Magnus Carlsen. All these years they played back and forth. Nakamura's had him on the ropes 2 or 3 times in totally dominating positions, and unfortunately he just blew it. But this time, Nakamura pulls it off. Let's get to it. Round 1 of the Bilbao Masters Final 2016. As white, the current world champion Magnus Carlsen. And as black, former U.S. champion Hikaru Nakamura. I'm really excited. I'm a big Nakamura fan, as you probably figured out by now. Don't get me wrong now. I'm not a Magnus Carlsen basher. Never have been. I like the kid a lot. He's an incredible talent. We're going to see 5-10 years from now whether he can be on the all-time best with Gary Kasparov, Bobby Fischer, like that. But I'm also a big Nakamura fan. Not because I'm from the U.S. I just like Nakamura. Always have, always will. Let's get to it. Carlsen's white. Nakamura is black. It's going to be a Sicilian Nadorf. Where's Maxime Vacher-Lagrave? I thought he was the Nadorf expert. G3, G6. We'll go through the opening here. I don't go too much into opening theory in this channel. Pawn takes, knight F6, castles, B3. Pretty typical stuff, and the computer off screen shows it as such, basically even. You'll always get that little bit of non-development on the queen side in the Sicilian. Knight C6, knight takes, pawn takes, bishop. Interesting move by Hikaru here. See if this is part of his preparation. Queen A5. Now, there's a couple of things here. Of course, it hits the knight. But I think also, it's swing around the queen somewhere in the future in any of these squares. Knight A4. Bishop G4, hitting the queen. Now, this is where I think Magnus makes his first error. It's about a third of a pawn advantage off screen. He goes F3. Or excuse me, he goes Queen E1. Screwed up here. Now Queen H5. Now white goes F3. And basically blows the little bit of advantage he had. He was about 3/4 of a pawn up at this point. There's a couple of things going on. Of course, we all see that pawn here is pointless because after bishop takes, he is starting to bring the bishop here. And that pawn on E4 is blocking the late squared bishop from taking the C pawn. No. If black had taken the queen, if those of you that were wondering, after rook takes, knight D7, F4, small advantage for white, nothing fancy. But after queen H5, Magnus goes F3. It's not a blunder by any means at all. I think a better way of going might have been E5. And everybody that was watching it live, the commentators were saying, why did Magnus go E5? Well, let's see what would have happened. Pawn takes, queen takes, bishop takes, knight D5. Interesting. Almost a pawn advantage for white. Of course, you would never take here, because the pawns come back and then all the pawns are all connected on this side. So Magnus decided to go F3 instead. Now, I'm not second guessing Magnus. That's what we thought was the best move. Of course, Hikaru goes bishop H3. G4. Now, Hikaru obviously had this all figured out. The queen's not going to get trapped. He's not going to lose the bishop. Queen H6. Everybody thinks that maybe bishop C1. Well, G5 takes care of that. So he goes rook to D1. Hikaru goes G5 anyway. Now bishop c1, pinning the pawn. The bishop takes, king takes. I think a Carl's okay here. Now, it still has a half-point advantage for white on the computer, but I think he's fine. I think he dodged a bullet. One thing he did do is get rid of that really strong light squared bishop for white, which I think was his goal to begin with. Moves the queen, h4, pawn takes, queen takes. I think allows to play rook a to d8 maybe, rook f to e8, either one. The best move is d5. What to do, what to do? E probably takes and c probably takes is a good sequence. Magnus decided to go g5 to kick the knight first. As you can see, this knight is guarding this pawn. So after pawn takes, rook can take now once the knight moves. Pawn takes. That you didn't see. Can't play pawn takes because the queen is here. So he has to go f4. Tiny advantage for black. I think that f3 scenario and through that is where Magnus really stumbled. And I think he's starting to feel a little bit of pressure. And now I don't know anything about any pressure he's under preparing for the upcoming match in November in New York City. I live about two and a half hours away from New York, in upstate New York, not New York City. And I'm thinking about some of the chess guys in this area. Thinking about hopping a bus down there and spending a day at the World Championship, one of the games. We'll have to see if it's really going to be played in New York. Of course, there's FIDE, who could screw up a one-car funeral, so we'll wait and see what happens. But nonetheless, maybe Magnus, it's a young guy this time. He's only played the World Championship twice, and it's both against the non. One where he won it and one where he defended his title. Maybe he's feeling some pressure. I really don't know. I think he hasn't played that well so far in this game. E6, c4 for Magnus, and the rook comes over for Carl. This isn't winning by any stretch of the imagination. Don't get me wrong here, okay? I'm not putting Magnus down, but I think Carl's played pretty well, and Magnus has played fair. Rook comes over, going after the isolated pawn. Now, they call this a coffee house move. Somebody I was watching a live commentary with Yasser Serwan on ChessBase, and somebody punched it in the comments section, a coffee house move. It's also the computer's move. Knight to e8. Knight c5. Give you an idea, if he didn't want f5 instead, those of you that were wondering, after pawn takes, queen f2, knight d6, and then knight sits really well. After knight c5, knight comes up to d6, protect the pawn again. Queen f2. This is a tough spot here. What do you do as black? You want to almost pass, but you can't pass in chess. He goes f5. Can't play pawn takes pawn en passant because the pawn's pinned against the king. Bishop b2. Maybe he figures our trading some pieces will be okay. Knight f7. And slowly but surely, Nakamura is staying in this game. There's a lot of attack coming on the white king. Bishop takes, king takes. Queen g3. Finally get rid of that stupid pin. That's got to be really annoying. Rook to d6. Here he comes doubling up. Rook d1. Rook a d8. Rook takes, rook takes. Queen checks. King g8. Now we're on move 32. I don't think Magnus was in time trouble because he very rarely is. I didn't check it that closely when I was watching it live. Right now it's about almost a pawn and a half advantage for Nakamura. Queen to g3, you have to go back. Even though you don't want to, you have to. He played rook f2. And I know what he wants, of course. He wants this. But Nakamura goes queen h5. Here comes the black queen. I think it was a little bit inaccurate on Nakamura's part. I think e5 was a decent move. And after pawn takes, rook to d1. And I think a Carl sits well. But after queen to h5, the other queen comes back. Carl says, no way, I'm trading queens. That's my whole attack. And this is where I think... But what else could he have done here? This is Carlsen, I mean. What else could he have done here? Now, the computer's got queen to g3, e3 is a question mark. That's a very, very human move. It stops the advance of the pawn. The rook's guarding this pawn. This knight's okay. But queen to g3 was the computer's choice, and after queen to e1, this is the computer scenario. Check, takes, takes, king h3. It's still bad for white, but much better, I think, than what happened. After queen to e3, e5. Carl's adrenaline's got to be pumping at this point. Has to be. Has to be. After pawn takes, knight takes. So he decides to go back, queen to g3. I don't think he knows what to do, and that's the end. If pawn had taken instead, after knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes, it still really sucks for Magnus. It's a piece for a pawn. But he might be able to save himself. But after queen to g3, rook g6, king h2, pawn takes, queen checks. Now we're move 37 now. King g1. They might have been in some small time troubles. They're probably trying to repeat just to get to the time control. And that was the 40th move, queen to h5. King to g1. Now they got plenty of time. Knight takes. What a killer. What a killer. Queen to b8. King. Queen checks. King h6. As Jennifer Hadi says, buenos, no checks. Queen f5. Carl checks. King to h2. Queen to d5. Hitting that knight. Has to go b4 to protect it. Now the king comes back. Queen c7 check. King h8 check. Now the rook comes back. Queen takes. Knight checks. King moves. Look at that exposed white king. Queen d6. And that's where current world champion Magnus Carlsen resigns for the first time ever to a Carl Nakamura. To give you an idea, one scenario, after queen has to go there. What else can it do? It's mate in 7 according to the computer. The queen has to go to g4 to stop mate. As you can see, of course, the queen and the rook. That's the mating square. You can't do anything about it. You can't block it. What's he going to do? Give you an idea, he'd have to give up the queen, but he still wouldn't do it anyway. It's mate. Sweet mate right there coming up. Takes a little bit, but that's the mate. So congratulations to my buddy Carl Nakamura. Finally getting that, I call it a sliver in his brain. It's just been bugging him. It's like a pebble in your shoe. It's just bugging you and bugging you and bugging you. And finally he beat, in a classical game, Magnus Carlsen. So congratulations. I thought it was a heck of a game played by Hikaru. But it's only round 1 in Bilbao, but I had to show this game because I'm a big Nakamura fan, and he finally got that monster out of his system. Anyway, folks, I always say, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.